This is Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 644, originally aired January 6, 2025. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to join me. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about and tap for and share a little process with you and how we can use tapping to respond to imposter syndrome. And before we do that, just a little story. When I was in college, my third year of university, I was something that was called an RA, or resident assistant. And basically, these were upperclassmen who lived in the dormitories and took care of the underclassmen and did programming and helped them with maintenance issues and just made sure that they had a good experience by having a colleague, a peer, a fellow student who was helping them to navigate all of that. And so as part of that job, I had to be on campus 2 weeks early for a bunch of training. And they trained us in a bunch of tools to be better helpers. And we learned university policy. And we did a whole bunch of stuff. And over the course of that time, we weren't in session all 2 weeks as we were getting the dorms ready and putting up bulletin boards and making welcoming signs for all of the students to have on their doors. And so one afternoon, I was in my building and I was hanging out with two other fellow RAs, Eric and Grant. And both Eric and Grant were a little bit non-traditional students because both of them had spent some time in the military before returning to school. So they were both older than me, they were both physically bigger than me and stronger than me and manly men. And they were my friends, and they are my friends. And as we sat in the room for 90 minutes, over the course of 90 minutes, I said exactly 0 words. And for those of you who have spent any time consuming my content, attended any of my classes, attending any of my trainings, you know me not talking is very, very unusual. And as the afternoon ended, I didn't even register that I hadn't said anything in the moment. But afterwards, as I was walking away and returning to my room and getting ready for dinner and reflecting on what had happened, I realized, one, that I hadn't said anything. And as I thought of that, what I felt, what it felt like in my body, and the reason why I hadn't said anything is I had felt like I was someone's little kid brother, that the adults were making the older kids allow me to hang out with them. So I wasn't in the room by invitation. I wasn't in the room because I was supposed to be there. I was in the room because everybody else was tolerating me. Now, that is exactly not what was going on. These are my friends. These are my colleagues. These are folks I've been doing training with. These are people I'd known for a while. But that is what it felt like on the inside. And so that's what we're going to explore today. We're going to explore this idea of imposter syndrome, but more importantly, what are a few questions that we can ask to unpack where that story is coming from? And then once we unpack that, then we can do some tapping on that. Now, before we do that, tapping is this absolutely amazing tool. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's something that I use every single day for my own transformation. I use it with my clients. I use it in my classes. And the amazing thing about it is it's something that is super simple for you to be able to use on your own in a self-applied sort of way. If you're new to tapping and you want to learn about it, all you need to do is go to learntotap.com. That's learntotap.com. I have a free guide waiting for you that will teach you the basics so you can start tapping right away. And if you follow the little red arrow in the upper right-hand corner, it will take you to learntotap.com. Whenever we're in a circumstance where we feel like we are an imposter, whenever we feel like we don't belong, it's because we feel like we don't fit in because of some standard. Either we are not good enough, we are not smart enough, we're not talented enough, we're not in the in crowd, we're not something. That the only way that we can feel like an imposter, the only way that we can feel like we're not living up to something, unless there is a standard in which we are living up to. But when we feel that sense of insecurity, and we feel that sense of not belonging, we're not thinking in terms of what we're not living up to. Instead, the evaluation has already happened in our subconscious mind that I don't live up to the standard. And so now I'm just dealing with the emotions of not living up to the standard. And so the emotions of the imposter syndrome are the emotions of I'm going to be found out. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be seen for who I truly am. And so when we have that roiling emotion about not belonging in that particular way, we're not thinking about why. Because at that moment, what we're experiencing is a truth. It's not an evaluation. We have already done the evaluation on the subconscious level of, I don't belong here, and they're about to find out. And so all of our emotions and all of our responses are protective. But like the story I told at the beginning of the episode, just because we've subconsciously decided we don't belong doesn't mean it's actually true. And so what I'm going to share with you is I'm going to share with you 3 questions that when I start to feel that I ask myself to kind of unpack why I feel that way. And then what that does is that gives me the ability to then tap more precisely about the disproportionate or misinformed response that I'm having from my subconscious mind. Because in almost every single circumstance, when we feel like we are an imposter, it is a feeling that is not 100% true, and it might not be true at all. It is just our emotional response. So, the first question, again, if we're working from this point of a standard that I'm not living up to, the question is according to what standard and according to who? And I do what and who together, who and what together, just because as I am processing through this, sometimes it's really hard for me to separate one from the other. So, again, what I'm looking at is what is the standard that I'm not living up to? So, in order for me to be inferior, in order for me to be an imposter in the wrong place, we want to identify what am I measuring myself against? And that could be capability, it could be talent, it could be work, it could be past success, it could be whatever thing. And so we want to understand what is the standard we're falling short of. And then the second thing is according to who? Because for there a standard to exist, the standard has to be created. So I feel inferior because I'm not meeting a standard, and that standard is created by someone. Now, there are 2 places that those standards can be created from. They can be an internal standard. I am not living up to this thing because I'm supposed to be living up to this thing. So once I've identified the standard, I ask myself, who created that standard? Did I create that standard? And then the second place it can come from is it can come from something external. Now, there are lots and lots of flavors of external. External could be the world, my culture, my religion, my family, my workplace, or it could be specific. My friend, my family member, my coworker, the neighbor next door. And so when I feel insecure, when I feel like I don't belong, I'm going to process through, and it might not be as linearly as I laid it out, but I'm trying to figure out what is the standard that I feel like I'm falling short of, and who is creating that standard. Now, sometimes simply going through and asking those questions and kind of processing through this first step, sometimes just processing through that creates enough relief. And that is the entire work that we need to do. Because once I recognize, oh, this is an unrealistic standard. Oh, I have made this standard up. Oh, I think they're judging me in this way and they're not actually judging me in this way. Now, it's also possible that I can recognize it's not a real standard. It's not a realistic standard. There's no one actually holding me to it, and I can still feel insecure inside of that. So tune in and pay attention to what is going on. So after we have evaluated what is the standard and who has created that standard, the second question we ask ourselves is that standard actually true or useful? Because sometimes I'm in a circumstance where there is a standard that is explicitly stated by someone else, by an organization, by a situation, that it doesn't matter if the standard isn't actually true, therefore it doesn't matter. Someone can say, if you don't do this good of a job, you're not good enough to be alive. You're not good enough to experience what is going on. Well, sometimes, even if someone is explicitly saying this is what the standard is, it might not actually be a true standard. So the second question I ask myself is the standard true? The third question I ask myself is, if the standard is true, so we're only going to add this third part, if it is true, does this standard matter to me today? Because some of the standards that I am carrying with me are standards from my past. In an academic setting, I had to do this well, either because of what the school said, my teacher said, my family said, whatever that was. And there are times in which the standard is true and I have to do well enough on that particular standard. I have to get 80 points out of 100 on my driving test in order to get a driver's license. That is a standard that is true and it's a standard that exists and I have to live up to that. But some of the standards that we are carrying with us are standards that we are carrying with us from the past, which may or may not have been true in the past, but they are certainly not true today. And so what you can see in these three little steps, according to what, according to who, is the standard true? Does the standard matter to me today? What this does is it gives us the process to be able to work our way through this. Because again, like I said at the beginning, when I am feeling insecure, the emotional response that I'm having about my safety, about my security, about my belonging is working from the place of, I've already said the standard is true, it is meaningful, it is valuable to me today. And so by asking these questions and dissecting what standard I feel like I'm being held to gives me the opportunity to have a different emotional response. Then, after I've processed through this, or while I am processing through this, I can tap. So if you wanted to tap while you're working your way through this, I would do something like this where I actually write out my answers. And so I literally just tap with my left hand and I write with my right hand as I think through, according to who, according to what. Is the standard true? Is the standard useful for me today? Or I can just think through those as I'm tapping and then afterwards do a little more tapping. And so then, after I've gone through this, this is what the tapping looks like. Tap on the side of the hand, take a nice big deep breath. And even if you haven't been processing through the three questions we just talked about, I want you to think of a place that you feel out of place, a place that you feel insecure, a place you feel over your head, because there probably is one of those in your life. And just move from point to point, repeating after me. I recognize the fact the insecurity that I am feeling is just a part of me that is trying to protect me, is just a part of me that is trying to keep me safe, is just a part of me that is trying to keep me healthy. Because this part has decided I don't belong. Because I don't meet some standard. And this part of me is afraid that the people around me are going to recognize that fact. The people around me are going to realize I shouldn't be here. I'm not good enough. I'm not capable. I just don't belong. And the reason why I am having this emotional response is because a part of me has decided that it is true that I don't belong. But I recognize the fact, this belief of not being good enough, at not belonging, is not true. And is not true for me today. And so I can appreciate how my emotions are trying to keep me safe. I can appreciate how my emotions are trying to keep me healthy. I can appreciate how my emotions are trying to keep me safe. And I recognize they are just working too hard. Because they are operating from something that is not true and is not valid. I give myself permission to be open to the possibility that I can actually belong. Not only am I allowed, but it is safe for me to claim my place and my space in this community. Nice big deep breath. Big stretch. Now, more than likely, as we tap through that, a whole bunch of tail enders showed up for that. More than likely, a bunch of memories and past experiences and all of those things, which is saying that your emotional self is true in saying that you don't belong in these circumstances. And intellectually, you know it's not. So it's really important in a circumstance like that, that we jot down all of those tail enders, write down all of the stories and things that are coming up. And you don't have to tap on them right now. But it now gives you a place to recognize that, the transformation for me, the way I found my way to tapping in a really concrete way was dealing with a sense of not feeling like I belonged. And it was something that over the course of a number of weeks, I put myself in circumstances where I felt insecure. I felt over my head because I didn't feel like I belonged. And I just tuned into those circumstances and I tapped and I tapped. And so it slowly chipped away and receded, because oftentimes that feeling of being an imposter and not belonging is not one of those things that we tap on once and they go away, because that's knit into the fabric of who we are. It's not a circumstance, but it's my identity. So if this is something that you are responding to and you need to respond to in a deeper way, I would set some time aside. I would do it every single day. I would do it on the regular for the next 3 or 4 weeks, just to make sure that this slowly recedes so that there are more and more circumstances where you feel safe. I am living proof that you can get over the sense of imposter syndrome to create a different life, and it can be done with tapping. So I'd really encourage you to dive into that in that particular way. If you know someone in your life who would appreciate an approach like this, please pass it along. Don't spam your inbox. But you might know 1 or 2 people in your life who would really enjoy this conversation and maybe this tool set. We always joke about the fact that our marketing budget is your word of mouth. The highest compliment you can pay to me and my work is to share it with someone else. As you look at the screen right now, you can see the entire archive of the Tapping Q&A podcast. Click on that playlist, dive in, explore some of the other topics. I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon.